Well, hello everybody. So I got asked a question about grounding your potable water plumbing supply lines. Well, we don't do that anymore in new construction, at least not in residential, because we're using a lot of this stuff that's called PEX, which is the cross-link polyethylene tubing. And then of course before that we would have had the CPVC, which is also a non-conductive material. But when you would have grounded this stuff goes back to the old times when they were using a lot of galvanized and a lot of copper, and that stuff is conductive. Now, grounding those lines all started when basically from the meter, solid copper or galvanized pipe running all the way to your house underground, pops up in your crawl space, and then starts breaking itself off to feed your fixtures. Now, what the electrician could do at that time was he could tie his earth ground into that conductive metallic supply line, and as long as it went 10 inches in the ground, it counted as his ground rod, and he didn't have to drive a spike in the yard. That's where it all started. Now, the house I used to live in, it had copper lines in it, but the city's service was that black poly stuff. So coming under my foundation, it was black poly, which is non-conductive, so it couldn't be used as a ground. But that plumbing system, being conductive, being copper, it could get energized by a lightning bolt or a faulty switch or something like that. And if you were in the bathtub, you could get a pretty nasty blast, shock. It could even kill you. So what they would have to do with that kind of split system like that was they would tie onto a hose bib and they'd run it back out to where the electrician had actually driven that spike in the ground, and we would ground those lines, that earth ground, back to that spike. That way, if it did ever get energized, that electricity would have a place to dissipate. Now, why is this still important? Well, maybe you're a service plumber. Maybe you're working on an old house. Maybe you went in there and made a repair on some copper lines, and you decided to do some PEX, some polyethylene. And we cheaped out here and we put 2 shark bites in there. Well, you don't really know what's going on with this system. If this is a really, really old house and they're using that copper plumbing system and it's going down 10 inches into the ground as their earth ground, you've broken that. You've broken that system. And if anything were to short out on that electricity, it's just going to energize that part and not make it on down to that ground. Or if it's spiked, if it's got the polyethylene or the black poly, sorry, that comes up to this and it's a floating system, you've done that, maybe you cut out that loop that goes back to that ground. So just to be on the safe side, whenever you do something like this and you cut a section of that copper out and you add that PEX in there, you're going to want to put what they call a jumper wire. You get the 2 little clamps and you take a little piece of copper wire and you basically you're jumping across that fitting, because this is non-conductive, this is conductive. If they are using that copper as a ground, you're gonna have to put it back together to complete that circuit again. But pretty much anytime you're using copper or cutting into copper like that, it is grounded at some point. Now, if you're just replacing a little hose bib and all that is what's not grounded anymore and the rest of the system's still grounded, that's not so much of a big deal. But it's good practice if you don't really know what you're looking at and you're going from copper to PEX to copper or CPVC, anything that's non-conductive, you're going to want to throw a little jumper wire on there to restore that circuit. So just remember that when you're out there in the field, and if you don't know and you're in doubt, just always put that jumper wire on there just to be on the safe side. You don't want to cook anybody in their bathtub. So. All right, that's it for that one, guys. Thanks.